What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Keith and Mike Watch Deep Space Nine. I almost remembered to hit the transporter Q.
It was pretty close for us, I'd have to say.
I mean, for us, definitely that was pretty good. So I'm very excited. Today, we have a very special QE episode of Deep Space Nine to talk about. We are talking about Deep Space Nine Season 1, Episode 6, Q-less. Even though, to be fair, it was Q more because Q is always more. How's it going, Mike?
It's going pretty well. So many faces, Keith. I hope your ears were burning the other night when I was watching this episode because I was calling for you. I was reaching out for you into cyberspace because I knew some stuff about Q, but I was confused whether I had seen episodes with him or if I just heard tale from our other shows. And so I was talking to you. Keith, this is how sad our lives have become. I spend so much time with you now that if I'm on the internet, even if you're not with me, I speak to you as if you're there. And that's what I was doing.
Well, look, I strive to be omnipotent, much like Q. So I did not hear you, but maybe I felt you. Maybe I did.
This was one of those episodes, and we'll get into it when we get into it, where I felt like the writers were just like, you know what? We don't need to provide a lot of context for these various characters who clearly we're supposed to know stuff about, because I was left to being like, oh, okay. They give you just enough. They're like, oh, he's a being, and they're like, oh, she's Picard's old flame, and that's about all you need. So go forth and enjoy.
Well, I mean, to be fair, there are so few people like you out there in the world,
but
especially
I don't know that
then.
at that time, you might have jumped in and been like, "Oh, Star Trek, I'm in."
Well, I mean, yes, maybe, but like, if you were at the
Keith,
place,
you're currently poo-pooing the entire concept of our show right now. So just put that in your feather.
I'm saying this is one of the benefits of our show, because you have such a unique idea here, because nobody was watching this in real time in the 90s not knowing Q, not knowing Star Trek, because Q shows up in the pilot of The Next Generation. So if you've seen any of The Next Generation, he also shows up like 4 more times. So you have to know who Q is. And if you're watching Deep Space Nine, you probably watched you're almost guaranteed to have watched Next Gen. So here we are 20, 30 years later, good Lord, with a very unique person in the world, and that's you, who has is watching Deep Space Nine without knowing Next Generation. So
it's not all I have, Keith. I should also, for the folks who are just watching this show on the channel, I've announced it on the other channels, I am on the tail end, I hope, knock on wood, here of the COVID. So if I sound a little funky and clear my throat a bunch, I do apologize. I'm on the mend, but thanks to all those watchers, listeners of other shows who've sent their well wishes. I do appreciate it. And thank you. Let's move forward.
Yes, well, and I, if you were watching the other things, turns out I officially do not have COVID for the third time, because I've tested negative, but I've still got a terrible cold, so I apologize in advance for that as well.
Watch out, world. Colds are still a thing.
It's my first one since like the end times, so it's been a different experience for sure. But I think we should stop talking about ourselves, which is hard for us, and talk about some of the people who are supporting our show. Mike, why don't you tell folks what they're doing to support our show?
Well, listen, we spent a lot of time putting this together. It might not be great, but we're giving it the old college try. If you have any discretionary income you'd like to help us offset our time and effort, you can do so very easily at patreon.com/K&M, spell out that and if you happen to do that, there's all kinds of different tiers, and one of the things you get is we're going to do a Q&A. We're also going to do a watch-along, which we're going to do our first one today. We're going to watch various episodes of, I'd say, let's not limit it. It could be anything. We're going to start with some TNG, because that's sort of the
We're going to do some setups.
Where you think Keith's going to teach me the things I need to know, the cliff notes, if you will.
Yes, well, there's some great setups. I might also even teach you how to move the Patreon logo up.
Good God. Guys, never do a podcast with a graphic designer. And while we're there, we have a few people who've jumped aboard already. We'd like to thank our patrons, indeed. Alan Zimmerman, Jorge Navoa, CloudLover69, and Brian Kaufman. If you'd like to join the bunch, once again, it's patreon.com/KNM. If for any reason you are not financially able to help us out, do not sweat it. Although you do get to do the watch-alongs, which are fun. You get to watch our weekly show about the practice. You get to watch me watch Deep Space Nine. And then you get to watch me and Keith talk all over some episodes of television.
Yes, indeed. And I'm excited today. Mike won't know what this means yet, but we're watching The Wounded today from Next Generation, which is a very important episode setting up Deep Space Nine. Way back years before it even aired. They were already laying the groundwork. Very, very exciting. All right, so let us continue and talk more about Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Season 1, Episode 6, Clueless, which aired on Sunday, February 7th, 1993. The top song, would you believe it, continues to be COVID, Mike.
Bittersweet memories.
Of course, we're hearing the fine strains of I Will Always Love You, Whitney Houston's cover of the Dolly Parton song. The top movie, Mike, are you ready? Loaded Weapon 1.
Do you think Dolly Parton knew that, but 21 years later, she would be being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which are words I said.
Also 29, but whatever.
However many. That's all I have. That's an anecdote I have because I saw a news report yesterday.
Boy, that's what you really come here for. The absolute...
Wait, Keith, we forgot another announcement.
What's that?
Are you disgusted by our faces? You may be. And should that be the case, and you'd rather listen to this nonsense on your commute to work, Keith, how can they do that?
Oh, that's right. We have now dropped this show into your podcast feeds so that if you would like to have all of this without all of the visual stuff that you can hear us grinding on during every episode, you can find it anywhere podcasts can be found. Just search for K&M Watches Deep Space Nine. It's up there, so enjoy that.
You need all this, but in 192 kilobits, you can get there.
There you go. So, anyway, I mentioned we're watching Loaded Weapon 1 back in 1993. I vaguely remember that. It was one of those rip-offs of whatever. Anyway, the New York Times headline talked about Arthur Ashe, tennis champion, dies. It was news back then. Pioneer Arthur Ashe. And this episode was directed by Paul Lynch, who has already directed here on Deep Space Nine. He directed A Man Alone. And this episode has a teleplay by Robert Hewitt Wolfe, who is a writer and story editor on 73 episodes of Deep Space Nine, and has a story of Hannah Louise Shearer, who was a story editor or writer on 11 episodes of Deep Space Nine, of Next Generation. This is her only episode of Deep Space Nine. So, Mike, I know all of that's really interesting, but you are really more excited for... You can do it. Trivia.
Right. Yeah. Ready? But you have the music ready?
No. It's embedded in the video.
Now Keith, waste your time with trivial trivia.
That sigh, if you want a little peek behind the curtain, the sigh we got from Mike is definitely part of our lives. So, all right. So here is some trivia about this episode.
Keith, before you even start the trivial trivia, start,
yeah.
You know, one of the things I had heard about COVID, and I've had a very mild case, I'm thankful, science. But the brain fog is something I'd heard about and I didn't quite understand. Now I work out quite a bit, but over the past week, walking even down the road has really winded me out. And I was taking the garbage out, you know, and thus I was carrying a garbage bag. And halfway to the garbage can, which is probably less than a quarter of a mile away, I stopped in my tracks and totally forgot what I was doing, even with the context clue of the garbage bag. So the chances of me getting any trivia correct are low. Wait, do you ask me questions here, or do I just listen to you to give facts?
Nope, it's not a quiz. Not a quiz at all. So,
well, there you have it. Have we done this before?
Yeah, we've done this. Actually, this is our seventh episode. All right, so Mike, relax. Just relax that COVID brain of yours. It is not a quiz. It is just an instructional here on Trivial Trivia. So this episode is a sequel. Not surprising via Mike's confusion about this episode. It's a sequel to 2 Next Generation episodes, not counting all of the Deep Space or the Q moments. It's a sequel to Captain's Holiday, where we first met Vash, and and Picard and Vash have their little dalliance, and to Cupid, where Q takes Vash and our heroes from the Next Generation into Sherwood Forest, and we do a whole Robin Hood adventure. So, if Mike hasn't seen those, I can understand why you're a little confused about this episode, but that's what I'm here for.
Before you continue, Keith, I'm going to add my own trivial trivia. That episode with the Sherwood Forest, which was called...
It was called Cupid.
Also made a sneak appearance in Keith's top 300 most wanted Playmates figure sets. I forget what number, but that was one of the ones you wished for.
That's right, a playset of all of the Robin Hood figures. It wasn't a great episode, but it certainly had an interesting visual, which would make for some cool action figures. Speaking of action figures, this was going to be the last trivia, but we're going to do it. Playmates Toys made figures out of both Q and Vash here from this episode. So here we have reviewed them both on the show previously. So check out the stuff below, and you can see what we thought about these figures. But now Mike will understand much better what was going on because he's seen the episode.
I believe, Keith, this is also the first mention of Odo's desire for a special bucket.
It is also a first. Yes, it is the first mention of Odo's bucket, special bucket, a desire for a special bucket.
Don't we all need a special bucket?
We all do. If the episode runs long, I could use a special bucket below my desk here, but it's not going to happen. Anyway, I'm
not sure we know what you're talking about.
I'm just saying, it's a lot of talking. You have to stay hydrated as you're talking, and sometimes we run long. It's hard to imagine us running long on an episode, but it happens. So, 2 other pieces of trivial trivia while all of you unsubscribe and throw your computers into the woods. The embryonic being container that plays a big role in this episode was also used as an Abenami meditation crystal on the Next Generation episode Angel 1. So we have a prop reduce, reuse, recycle here from Next Generation. And the last piece of information, which I think is interesting, is Jennifer Hetrick, who plays Vash, dated Patrick Stewart. And they were dating when she joined the show. So
Interesting.
If you noticed a little bit of chemistry back in Captain's Holiday, it's because they were already having some holodeck time. So there you go. Which, of course, why wouldn't you? Did you see Patrick Stewart's short shorts in that episode? Mike, you haven't, but I haven't. Really
but Keith, I have worn cans for a very long period of time, so I know what a nice ear massage can do.
We're going to learn about that as well this episode. So the guest stars, obviously, John DeLancie is here as Q, and the aforementioned Jennifer Hetrick is playing Vash for her 3rd and final episode in the Star Trek canon, and Tom McClyster as Kolos. So I think it is now time for us to hop into our viewing room and start talking about this episode. Deep Space Nine, Season 1, Episode 6, Cueless. So let us begin our journey with, of course, with a fantastic screenshot that you've done here of Julian Bashir regaling a Bajoran woman with the story of his exams. Because ladies love exam stories. And he tells the famous pre-gangliotic fiber, costing him the valedictorian story for the first, Mike, of many times.
Okay, great, because he always be horny.
He always be horny, and he has a lot of feelings about that exam, which is gonna be a little joke that comes up, and then it's gonna matter.
So listen, Deep Space Nine thus far, I thought that Ben Sisko was given masterclass in side-eye. Let's not forget O'Brien gives some incredible side-eye throughout this show.
Colomini, I wrote down here, O'Brien witnesses and understandably wants to puke. And all of that subtext there in Colomini's performance, he gives phenomenal side-eye in that ridiculous story. So
I want to throw a nod to the writing because, you know, we joke, Bashir, be horny, blah, blah, blah. But what I think is a really great wrinkle in their writing with him is that not only is he always thirsty, clearly, but his game is so bad. And he's always trying so hard, and it's so bad.
But the weird thing is that that Bajoran lady was, like, into it. She was 100% in. So I don't know, like...
Until he was, like, not valedictorian, you know,
if you live in the future... and it's written by a bunch of sci-fi nerds, your game does not have to be nearly as good to be successful.
Yeah, it's true.
But that story's going to come up, Mike. So remember this moment. The seduction is interrupted when they are called to rescue a runabout that has emergency docked and lost power. When they get inside, they find an unconscious Dax and Vash, for some reason, who has been in the Gamma Quadrant for 2 years. And O'Brien recognizes her from the Enterprise. So, Mike, how confused were you here?
Pretty confused. I mean, they made it very clear that we should know this person, and O'Brien definitely did. So my suspicion was that she was from the TNG, which was confirmed. But what I loved about this is that Dax and the other and Vash on the ship here, which clearly was in some distress, some like pretty major distress, it turns out, because we find out that like the energy sucks out the life support and all that stuff. They're so nonchalant. Once he reinserted that NES game,
right?
Just, like, stuck it in.
It's the battery. Yeah.
They were like, yeah, no big thing. We almost died, but it's cool. It's daily.
Look, it's Starfleet. They almost die constantly. You know, they're Starfleet officers. This is dangerous part of the job. But it's definitely like cool. I think the cartridge there as the emergency battery is pretty funny. But it makes sense. So there's Vash. O'Brien's like, hey, what's your deal? We find out she's been there. And at the end of the teaser, Q is there. Whoo, boy. Now, Mike, did you recognize, because you've seen Q in general, haven't you?
Well, we've seen Q figures. We've discussed him in the practice. I think he showed up once.
John DeLancie did. If Q showed up on the practice, I would be psyched.
And I think we talked a little bit about him then. And what I said, Keith, so clearly we either talked about it or I saw an episode, because what I said and turned out to bear fruit, I was like, isn't he like a low-key type? A sort of mischievous, sort of puckish, rapscallion being. And that's, I mean, pretty precisely what it is.
He is indeed a rapscallion. And at the beginning of Act 1, in the infirmary, Bashir hits on Vash because he's Bashir. She knows a lot about the Gamma Quadrant and seems actually kind of into the young doctor. Like,
but she's kind of into everybody.
She's pretty damn flirty. Yeah, that was a thing that happened because Bashir, my goodness, early Bashir has one purpose in life. So Sisko and Dax discuss how Vash got into the Gamma Quadrant. It's mysterious, but we learn here that she's an archaeologist, which you would know from Next Gen. Did you sort of get the idea that she's kind of Indiana Jones?
Yes, I did. I didn't use that exact analogy, but that's what I was thinking.
She's like a Indiana Jones like, that should be in a museum, but then he still steals it and like takes it out of the place. But she doesn't.
What I loved, I don't know if we catch it on a screenshot, is that they were like, we're gonna give her like a archaeologist bag, but we got to make it really thick rope.
Oh yeah, well, because she's doing a lot of swashbuckling and such. So they go into the assay office to store a bunch of artifacts she brought back from the Gamma Quadrant. They look at a bunch of fancy stuff, as you would expect. But it ends with a glowy orb that seems important. Then,
they make it pretty clear it's important. Except they make the guy, what did you call him, the Asher office?
The assay office.
The assay office. First of all, he looks like Otho from Beetlejuice, number one. Number two, they made him sort of just they made him so nonchalantly, like the first two artifacts that he was like very kind of reverent about. The third one, he's like, meh, shiny thing. It's kind of shiny. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, essentially this is, especially if you went to old Yankee Stadium, you went to go like a Yankee game, they didn't let you take your stuff in, so it was like the bar across the street would have all these lockers where you'd...
No, it's when you go to the water park, man.
The water park, yeah, that too. Yeah. Same deal. So
you go to Six Flags and it's like, hey, $12, and here's a 3x3 inch thing to put all of your belongings in.
Yeah, it's essentially what that is. So after that,
and then you get the key on the little thing you put around your wrist, and then it stabs you every time you go on a ride.
Yeah, man, I want to go to Six Flags. I'm ready.
Remember we talked about it 3 years ago?
We have been talking about it for almost 20 years, and one of these days we're gonna do it. This summer we're gonna do it. My birthday's coming up. We're gonna do it. Totally. I swear. Anyway, we find out that Vash, she's headed out the next day. She's not going to be here very long. Got to get that ticking clock going. Cisco tracks her down and tells her the Daystrom Institute is interested in her artifacts. She confesses that she's, like I said, totally Indiana Jones and sells her artifacts.
And he's like, yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. I looked into you.
Yeah. And guess what? Quark notices. That's such a good screenshot.
Wait, what's going on behind? Like, what's happening inside that room? Is there a stand-up comedy thing going on?
Oh, that would be hilarious. I would love to know what Bajoran's stand-up comedy is like. I mean, Cardassians walk like this, but Bajorans walk like this. That'd be terrible.
Almost as terrible as the bit you just attempted and aborted.
Hey, you don't know. It might be funny. You just have COVID brain.
It's funny to Bajorans, that's for sure.
That's what I'm saying. They don't have a good sense of humor. They're very spiritual people. So back on the shuttle, O'Brien can't figure out what caused it to lose power. Its batteries are dead, and it's all mysterious. So the mystery is beginning. And O'Brien tells Cisco, because they gossip like this, that Vash was banging Captain Picard.
Yeah, I was like, damn, they really want to draw this like Ben versus Picard contrast more, but he's well, good for him, basically.
I didn't know O'Brien was such a gossip, but I mean, was that a need to know? Do we need to know that they were, they're playing hide the tricorder? But I don't know. There it is. O'Brien,
you told me that they were dating in real life.
That's true. They were doing all that. That's true. I'm a gossip.
You're basically the O'Brien of this podcast.
Without question, like struggling with tech, being tired and annoyed, and apparently being a gossip.
Who am I? You told me the other day. You're like, you're totally. You're like, so and so is basically you.
Oh, I forget who.
I have to look it up.
I have your COVID brain.
Yeah.
So anyway, the lights go down, and we find that the power is being sucked out of the station, just like the shuttle. Which takes us to Act 2, where O'Brien takes Vash to her quarters. She asks about Picard, and O'Brien continues to be suspicious. Who did I say that you were, Mike?
I can't find it. We were talking about TNG. We were talking about Worf.
Oh, you're Geordi.
I'm Geordi.
Yeah. Also, like, actually, Geordi and Bashir have a lot of similarities, right? Because they're both like crazy thirsty, and unlucky in love, except for Geordi's game is terrible, and the women he's doing it with react to him as if it's terrible. Whereas O'Brien, his game is terrible, and the women are like, ooh, or at least
you
the
know why,
extras
Keith?
are.
Because he's a doctor. He's a doc.
That's true. That's true. Although I think engineer is like he's the ship doctor. That's important. Anyway, so she asks about Picard because we're continuing to reference the Next Generation here, trying to get trying to tie them together, get some ratings. And she goes back to her quarters alone and is visited by Q. And of course, they fight like exes. He wants her back and she's not interested. He tries to seduce her by taking her to various places in the universe. What did you feel here about the...
So it was a little muddy for me because clearly the way he portrays his character, which is great, is very oh my God, Larroquette. It's very John Larroquette. It's very quippy, very like everything's a joke. And so I couldn't quite understand. Clearly they had an arrangement, right? And he was taking her around the galaxy and the quadrants and such. But what I couldn't understand is if it was actually a romantic relationship or not. Because I hadn't seen the previous episode, I didn't know. He's clearly behaving that it was that way, and she doesn't seem into it as much. So I couldn't quite tell what their actual relationship was until he like lays on her on the bed, and I was like, oh, I hope there's some context to this.
Yeah, it actually is interesting because it's a little bit murky at the end of Cupid, because at the end of that episode they do run off together. And he said, I'll take you all over the universe and you can steal artifacts and sell them because you're a terrible person. And there was certainly some sparks going on there. So most of the context we have about what their relationship was is from this episode.
Okay.
So it does feel like I read this as they had some sort of a romantic relationship and then broke up.
Yeah, I do. It does read, and once again, I don't know her relationship with Picard, but through the context of this episode and her interactions with multiple characters, she's definitely, her relationships in general are very transactional.
Oh, for sure. Mike, you remember the word Horgon?
I do.
Yeah, that's from that episode.
Oh,
with
so it's
Vosh
an
and
artifact.
Picard.
It's a Klingon artifact that be thirsty, be horny.
Everything except for the Klingon part, but yeah. But yeah, I mean,
poor attribution.
You put it on your desk on Ryza, or you put it in front of you, and then like this is a question we'll get into in other episodes. And then like the Ryzans will then just do it with you, and that's sort of how that works. Like it's very confusing. Are they prostitutes? Are they not?
No, so it's like Abercrombie perfume. Deal? It's like Abercrombie perfume.
How does that work? Is like Axe body spray if you just spray it on yourself?
Yeah, I remember like I could never go into Abercrombie stores because you were supposed to be like 6 foot and hot. But I remember that right when you walked in, there was like this Abercrombie cologne thing, and apparently like all the girls in high school, like that was, if you were wearing that, they were feeling it.
Well, as you can probably tell, neither one of us felt anything in high school. I've forgotten my Horgon, so there it is. Oh my God. Anyway, where are we? So we are reminded in this scene that Vash is totally a wanted criminal all over the universe. Then Quark shows up with a bottle of Canar, and he wants to auction her stolen artifacts, and she's 100% into it. So when Quark shows up, it's a silly little sight gag where he just like disappears Quark, and then she makes him come back.
Go to the next screenshot. I think I captured it. Boop.
Well, that's true. He disappears Quark, and then he disappears himself. Anyway, she's 100% into Quark selling her stolen artifacts.
I think you could truncate that sentence. She's 100% into Quark.
I don't necessarily take it as as her being into Quark. She's seducing him for a better share of the profits.
Yes, but then we'll get to the end of the episode, which I think is a little more ambiguous.
All right, fair enough. But we learn here something important, and something that I don't necessarily want to know about, but it's going to be a part of Deep Space Nine lore. Mike, now that you've seen this episode, if you wanted to get a Ferengi off, how would you do that?
All right, well, this is an explicit episode, right?
Apparently.
So, I can't wait. No, I can't say it's on the internet. I can't do it. Let me be an adult about it and just say, apparently, their earlobes what's the word?
Erogenous is
erogenous zones. Yes.
Yes.
I was going to say androgynous, but that's wrong.
Androgynous. No, that's not. So it's just as icky as it sounds. And the benefit of sci-fi, you can show it on TV. And
they do. And then he makes he all but makes a cigarette reference.
Do you know what it's called when you bring a Ferengi to completion through the earlobes?
There's a word?
There is a word. I don't know if it's been established in canon yet, whether they reference it in Next Gen or not, or whether it's coming up. But the word, get ready to feel a little gross inside, is umox. So she is performing umox on Quark there, which is it's uncomfortable.
She got him down from 50-50 to 50 to 80-20, I think. No, 60-40.
Like
No, it's something better than that.
No, she got him all the way down and off apparently. So anyway, so he goes away and Bashir shows up hoping she'll rub his ears. And he asks her to dinner. And Q makes fun of him, and I'm on Q's side.
Oh, totally. He's so bad. Perfect.
It's so stupid. That's a great screenshot.
He's mugging all over the place, and I was here for it.
Oh my god, yeah. John DeLancie apparently has like carte blanche. It's just like Q. He's Loki, right? He can do whatever he wants and be as ridiculous as he wants. And we have a lot of
now, Keith. Let me ask you before we go any further, because I was wondering this: is there significance to the uniform he chooses to wear in his human form here?
It's an excellent question, Mike.
I'm a scholar.
This is some good podcasting right here. Well, he is currently wearing the Next Generation uniform because on the Next Generation he mimicked Picard's uniform, which pissed Picard off because he was wearing a captain's uniform and was not a member of Starfleet and had not earned those pips. So he is still wearing that, and then we're going to notice a change when he switches
So is he a space alien? Is he a human? What is his thing?
Okay. All right. We should probably explain what Q is. So Q are a race or species of alien that is omnipotent. They have absolute sort of power of space and time. They're immortal. They can basically create and destroy universes with the snap of a finger.
They're gods.
They're gods, essentially, yes. And there are a bunch of them, and they are called the Q Continuum. And it's kind of murky what their deal is, like what their purpose is. They sort of gallivant around. They're all a little, they're all a little Loki-ish, although this Q, they're all named Q.
So
John
we meet
DeLancie
multiple Q?
We meet multiple Q. As we move forward, especially in Voyager.
See, that troubles me a little bit, Keith.
Are you just not into polytheism?
Well, it's a show-based sci-fi works its best when there are clearly established rules, or when we come up to problems because the rules are being broken, but then we use science to just kind of reconfigure the rules. When you bring in omnipotent species, it's sort of it exists outside of those rules and can be cumbersome. I'm not saying this is the case, but I'm saying it can become cumbersome.
Well, yes, and I think the Star Trek explanation here would be, which is frequently used, they seem omnipotent and they seem all powerful because we don't understand their power. It doesn't mean that it is necessarily limited just because he says it's unlimited, because we see multiple times that the Q Continuum is able to control him, is able to punish him, is able to, so it's a little murky. I mean, they don't really get too far into it, which sort of makes sense, but they continue this story of, like, what is Q and how does Q work all the way through right now in Picard. So, and we know that the DeLancie Q is the lokiest of all of them, and so he's sort of a black sheep among the Q. So he's.
Do they usually kind of stay out of these meddling in set affairs?
They usually do, mainly because they consider humanoids sort of like bugs. They're not, but Q is fascinated by them and Picard, so he's always sort of showing up because he finds them interesting. Anyway, so moving forward, we do a lot of blinking in and out from Q, as he is apt to do. Then he shows up at Bashir's date, dressed as a Bajoran waiter, and tries to tell Bashir not to date Vash, like the weird ex. And Bashir tries to stand up to him, but Q makes him sleepy.
Or roofies him. Same difference.
Well, he Q-fies him. He
Q-fies him.
He Q-fies him, which I thought was kind of silly. It was fun. I liked it. And, one of the things that, Mike, you don't get, Q loves a good costume. So he's always wearing some other silly costume just for fun. So giving him a chance to be a Bajoran waiter here is fun.
This was a moment where I actually thought, okay, maybe he is, for however trivial it may be, humans and such. And of course the monologue he gives later, but he did have feelings for Vash.
Oh yes, no. I think it's very clear that he does, in his own QE kind of a way. Obviously, why would he be invested in any of this otherwise? So Bashir goes away, and O'Brien recognizes Q because, of course, he dealt with him back on the Enterprise.
But in the TVest of TV ways, Q doesn't see O'Brien there.
No, of course not. The omnipotent being wouldn't have noticed O'Brien. But I think I can solve that because Q doesn't care.
Yeah.
None of this matters to him. Like, O'Brien can recognize him or not. It doesn't make any difference. So he fills in Sisko and Kira and on Vash and Q's relationship. And the lights go out. There's a technobabble power issue. And O'Brien, of course, blames Q. So we have our sort of ticking clock. We have our escalating crisis on the station. But at this point, it's just a power loss. So back with Vash and Quark, they haggle over the glowy orb. Quark knows it's the good stuff somehow. Sisko shows
it's very shiny, Heath.
It's very shiny. It's blinky. I think I saw it on Next Generation. Like it's a used Next Generation screen used prop from the Next Generation. Like it's obviously worth something.
Collectors are going to pay for that. It's almost worth as much as an estate sale.
Indeed. So Sisko shows up to talk to Vash and ask about Q, and Q answers for himself because there he is. Q changes uniforms. Here we are.
Keith, it's almost like I planned these screenshots to your narrative, but I didn't.
No. So we get our confrontation here because the captains always have to be confrontational with Q. And Picard
They're gonna make out? They're very close. Very close.
They might. They might, with any luck. And so he changes. Yes, we're gonna get into it. But first I have to point out that he does, of course, change into the Deep Space Nine episode or uniforms so they can make the action figure out of it. A very cheap, quick head swap, and of course he's got to be in the captain's uniform. But Sisko wants to talk privately. Q makes everyone disappear, then does a fighting fantasy thing. Here it is, because it's Q, and it's not a Q episode without silly costumes. And all of a sudden, Sisko punches him out. What did you think about that?
I thought it was awesome. First of all, I loved this whole sequence because I was like, yeah, let's be freaking silly and goofy, which is something we haven't done on the show really yet. And I was like, yeah, they're not afraid to go there, and it's very funny. And it lets Ben here do some different stuff than just a captain. I'm either scowling or I'm pleasantly amused, which are the two faces he gives me mostly. But what I think the sort of peek through the curtain bit here, which I think is excellent, and even me as like not a huge next gen person caught, especially in an episode where we're talking about a woman who Picard used to sleep with, yada, yada, yada.
Right.
The little line where Q's like, he punched me. And Picard never punched me, and Ben's like, I'm not Picard. I thought was like a really great flag in the sand moment for the series.
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly you're. It's almost like a break in the fourth wall because you're like very high. You're highlighting like, yeah, we brought in Q, but this is a very different situation. And it's fun. I mean, it speaks to the difference between the two characters because obviously Picard wouldn't ever punch him, but Cisco will lay you out. And that's going to
and
be
I thought
an important
that the fight choreography here wasn't as terrible as usual. Well, it's very in the theme of what the old the Gangs of New York style. So I allow it.
Yeah, no, it's like I was like Leo DiCaprio was had his hands up all weird like that. That's funny. A bunch of unscrupulous folks arrive on the station for the auction, and Odo's watching, of course. But the lights keep going out. What do you think about all these interesting costume designs?
Awesome. I thought it was awesome. From the boxing sequence, awesome costumes. I thought that Vash herself had some excellent costume swaps, some very 90s, like hip-hoppy type color, hanging with Mr. Cooper type balloony. I liked Vash's costumes. I liked these costumes, especially like bucket head, but it was like a sash. Really cool.
Uh-huh. Yeah, well, I mean, and that's... What I like about Deep Space Nine is that even just in the background, if you pay attention to the background, there's just endless varieties of cool costumes and alien effects that wouldn't make sense on Next Gen because like, wait, why is that alien there? But here, it's like an airport. So anything can walk in. It can make for some fun stuff. So the lights keep going out. We have more power drain than the atmosphere starts disappearing because there's a bunch of hull breaches, which is not good because you don't want a hull breach in a space station because, vacuum of space. And we find out that a focused graviton pulse is tearing holes in the station. Uh-oh. And Cisco starts to think, hey, it might not be Q. Now, were you still thinking it's Q here, or were you picking up what Cisco's throwing down?
I don't know. It seemed to me that Q was probably involved, but he didn't seem as antagonistic. Like, I couldn't remember if he was a full-on bad guy or not, but he didn't seem like you said, he seems very, none of this really matters to me. He's very flippant, and so it didn't seem like he would be trying to kill everybody, so...
Well, and it's interesting, with Q... He started initially as much of a battier bad guy and then becomes a much more comedic character. But they do sort of complete the circle. He is always like are you super evil or are you just having fun? What is your deal? So
the other thing I thought was kind of cool as far as like television calculation goes is that I was sort of, I can't remember exactly where this was about midway, maybe a little past. And I remember thinking to myself, it's too late to introduce a whole new plot device as to what's causing this. So let me start mysterying what have we already seen, what things have they highlighted already that could be the cause, and it's not a far jump to where we get to.
Mike starts Scooby-Dooing the Deep Space Nine. So we have a scene here where Odo and Quark spar. Of course, Odo knows about the auction, and we mainly learn that Odo doesn't care much about money. And Quark tries to figure out, what does Odo like? He almost gets there with a latinum-plated bucket, which doesn't make any sense character-wise, because we're going to learn what the bucket represents moving forward, and certainly Odo wanting something latinum-plated, Odo doesn't care the tiniest bit about ostentatious stuff like that. So that's an interesting, like, looking back on it, knowing the Odo that we know through 7 seasons, that was a little bit out of character, that little scene there.
All I can remember, and this is a deep cut, I apologize, but for anybody who's watched Keith and I through our journey, this is a deep, deep cut. But all I could think of in that moment, Keith, was that time I had to Photoshop Q.
Oh, yes!
Video FX a Q and knew nothing about Q.
Mm-hmm.
All I knew, or not Q, Odo.
Odo.
I had to do Odo and his bucket, and that's all I knew, Odo in a bucket. And so I did it, and you were surprised by how true to life it was with zero context.
Yeah, well done. That's it's somewhere buried in our videos from the Out of Practice podcast. So if you are interested in finding out more about that random reference to Odo, listen to 176 episodes of the Out of Practice
find
podcast.
out which episode René Auberjonois appeared in David E. Kelly's The Practice. Find that podcast video version of us on YouTube and watch to the very end.
No, we want them to watch all 176 episodes, all 500 hours.
I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't wish that
I
upon
wouldn't do
anyone.
that either. I regret being there. Anyway. So Vash and Q continue to spar. Vash says she can take care of herself, and Q briefly tortures her
Yeah, he cocoons
with a
her.
disease he protected her from. So Michael Westmore and the makeup designers got to really play here in this scene. It was
He's like, hey, without me, you're the witch from Into the Woods.
it's the last midnight Vash. But it's I thought it was really cool. I mean, of course, like Q being Q, it's pretty hardcore torture. Like, I'm gonna like make you go through this horrible disease.
What I find is not only that. First of all, it does show like how much he actually did protect her through her journeys, but
Right.
also it is indicative of what we've come to find from just the general extras on Deep Space Nine. Most of them are dicks. Like, yes, one random extra comes to help her out when she becomes diseased, but the rest kind of just like look at her, stare, and like say bad shit to her. And I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of dicks on this. Remember the episode where there was like hate crimes?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, they're just asking like, "Where's your mask?
Yeah,
You're gonna come here with that horrible disease." Like, she clearly is unvaccinated. So,
there's the one nice extra.
there's the one nice extra. Thank you
And
for
then,
that.
oh yeah, I don't think I didn't show the dicks.
No, well, that's all right. We don't need to show the dicks on the internet. Excuse me. So, in Act 4, the station has 14 hours to live if they can't find the source of the power drain. Tick, tick. And Dax figures out they can find the power drain with a small amount of toxic gas. And Q shows up and actually says the word technobabble. Another great break
So
of
the
the
plan
fourth
here,
wall.
Keith, is that Dax ostensibly wants to fart into the space station and then watch where the fart goes.
That's right. That's exactly how that works. But I loved him saying technobabble there, because a peek behind the curtain, which many people know, but because my uncle worked on the show, he told me about it way back when. The crew, the cast and crew and the writers would actually reference technobabble as technobabble. And so frequently the first drafts of the script would have a insert technobabble here when they needed to come up with like the technical whatever. So it's almost like him using that word is a little nod to the people working on the show, not even to the fans. It was just a little inside joke, which now everybody knows. So Q, of course, rapid fire insults everybody. Good old Q, because he sprays insults, which is really fun. And he points the finger at Vash and her auction. And an alien shows up to talk to Quark and is able to say obsequious through all of that makeup. Frankly, give that guy an Emmy. And we have more graviton issues. They can't technobabble solve it for 7 more minutes. It's getting dire. The entire station is being pulled into the wormhole. So the stakes are getting it's getting pretty dire here on Deep Space Nine. But
what I found interesting about the stakes. At one point, Ben was like, "We have this much time, so at minute 19, we're gonna just evacuate everybody so that we don't lose anyone." So you feel
Right.
like, okay, at least it's not like imminent death. But then at this point, we're like, did they miss that point of no return, or is it still we just don't want to lose the station?
I think had they reached that point of no return, they would have started evacuating.
So the
So
threat, there's never is like a major threat of we're all gonna die.
Well, and also with Q episodes, and you wouldn't know this at this point, but Q always pulls people to the brink of disaster, always says, oh, it's not me, but he never really lets the disaster happen. It's always some sort of a game.
He also just gave them on a platter the answer to the mystery.
He certainly did. Well, because that's what he likes doing. He loves people. He loves telling the truth when people think he's lying, which is always a fun little adventure for narcissists like myself. So we watch Q's auction starting in the dark. And they bid us some stuff, and Vash tries to teach where the stuff came from, but Quark dumbs it down because nobody cares how. He knows his audience.
But they keep saying numbers, and he keeps getting closer to udakalo, or what's it called? Udami? Umami? No, that's sushi. What is it called?
Umox, Mike. Umox.
Oh, umami's close.
Yeah, I think so. Now, I'm gonna self-censor what I was about to say there. So you're welcome, world. More specifically, you're welcome, Mike and Jen. So they back on ops. They run a sensor sweep and try to track down the problem. They narrow it down to the central core, but no further. But we all know where it is. The
follow the fart.
Follow the fart. So we see here some good recycled footage from the pilot as they're trying to push the station away from the wormhole before it gets sucked in. And the auction continues, and they auction off, Mike, a fancy shiv. So that's fun.
The Dagger of Amun-Ra. You ever play that game?
No.
It's an old PC adventure game, The Dagger of Amun-Ra. Lara. Anyway, move on.
Oh, all right. So Q interrupts and tells everyone at the auction the station's about to explode. But he continues to say he's not causing the danger. And this, of course, there's your Dagger of Amun-Ra there on our screenshots. If you're listening to the podcast of this, you're not getting the screenshots. So hop over to YouTube, give us a like and subscribe, and check out all of the screenshots that Mike takes. So this is where we have Dax has her technobabble solution idea. Full power. So every time they use power, it causes damage, but or going full power will cause more damage, but will help them find the source of the issue. So they as frequently happens in Star Trek, doing the inverse of what you expect is the solution. So Quark and Vash start to auction the glowy orb. That seems important, and they're going to get so much money for it. Very exciting. Really, you can see more of those amazing costume and makeup effects.
Yeah, like even that. Go back one screenshot. Even that dude in the background. No, one more for it.
Oh yeah,
the dude in the far background who never, I think, is even shot in focus is got a really cool makeup design.
It's so cool. Yeah, it looks like
the Crypt Keeper.
It looks like the Crypt Keeper, and also the guy who ran the library in the Next Gen Season 1 episode. I forgot what it's called. Anyway, I'm sure they're reusing stuff right and left. Just redress it a little bit here and there. So, there he is.
Focus. Yep.
Oh, cool. Cool. I mean, that guy had to stand in there for I don't know how many hours putting on makeup
but we've run out of budget, so just give him human hands.
That's exactly right.
No.
But look at that hand.
He's got 6 fingers.
6 fingers. That's right. So that's, I have seen this episode I don't know how many times. I've never noticed the fact that the extra there has 6 fingers until this very minute. Cool. See, the detail work that you find here is really, really fun. So we continue the auction. They find it. And of course, it's the orb that's causing everything. And it's gonna blow. They beam it off the station just in the nick of time. It glows and turns into a big alien thing.
I thought I got it. There it is.
There it is.
Anyway, I always want to get this explosion. But this was a shock to me. I didn't know it was actually a live thing. That's cool.
Yeah, and we basically just did the plot to encounter at Farpoint again.
But do we find out like why it needed all that energy, or it's just like it's not necessary for us to know?
I think it was sucking out energy to try to escape.
Okay.
I think that's the idea. and Mike also doesn't know this, but this, we talk about it when we talk about the whole episode, but like, it's Encounter at Farpoint again, because very similar plot device, very similar solution. The thing that was that the bad guys were exploiting turned out to be a living alien that they were using for whatever, and it flies away into space, and that's the solution, and it kind of even looks like that. And Q is involved. It's an odd recapitulation of the pilot to Next Generation. Spoiler alert. But what did you... So, seeing this the first time, was that a cool solution for you?
Yes. I found the, like, let's follow the fart on the machines, and then, like, not... With all the equipment and all the technology, they couldn't just, like, pinpoint it for them. That we had to, like, literally use our Geiger counters and, like, walk into the auction room and then they literally followed it all the way up to the thing. Like, they couldn't even make any assumptions up to that point. I found that to be a little, like, ridiculous. But the fact that it was a live thing that was sucking up the energy, and the fact that they had just sold it for, like, 1 billion metal things. Whatever.
1 billion
gold-plated
metal things.
tritiums or whatever was kind of cool. And the fact that up until the last minute, Vash and Quark didn't give two shits because they just wanted that cash money. I thought that was kind of unique. I liked everything except sort of the seek and find, but, you know, TV.
Yeah, well, fair enough. Although, I will always go back to the standard defense of it's an alien object. It's from a different quadrant of the galaxy. Their sensors are not designed to pick up this thing, right? It's looking for a type of radiation the Geiger counter's not used to, or something like that. That's sort of my fix. Anyway, all is well, and Vash is headed off to the Daystrom Institute, but Quark tries to talk her into stealing more stuff. And she's like, I love stealing stuff. Q shows up and makes a Watergate joke, which I thought was funny. And he keeps trying to get her to hook up with him again, and she still says no. But they break up friendly, which is good. And she decides, you know what? Screw the Daystrom Institute. I'm off to rob more ancient civilizations. And we have another little Umox moment there because need to hit that again. And Bashir finally wakes up, having been asleep through all of that. And that is the end of that episode.
Also at the end there, it wasn't just the Umox moment. She's like, tell me how I get to this other place you want me to go. And, like, she puts his arm... I feel like I just got the vibe that she's digging on our boy Quark.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, it's not necessarily
they're very
impossible.
Similar. They've got a lot of the same interests, you know, which is basically robbing and what's the word when you steal another a cultural appropriation? They're into that.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Super into that. That's fun.
Yeah, that's like they could do that together. It's like a couple like hobby. I mean, I don't know.
No, that they have some similar interests. No, fair enough. All right, well, folks, you know what it's time for. It's time for Mike's quiz.
And now it's time for Mike Indeglio's
It's so quiet.
Vocabulary Quiz.
That's right. It got very quiet. I don't know why it got quiet. You know, I've had to change the settings so many times. There it is. Now you can hear it. Okay, your first vocab word to define is Q.
Q isn't a person, Keith. Well, it is a person, but it's also a species of omnipotent beings who are very, who this particular one we get to meet is very low-key-ish, mischievous, likes to play with his food before he inevitably Scooby-Doo's it at the end.
Affirmative.
All right, here's the next one. It's not fair. It's the Daystrom Institute.
The Daystrom Institute is much like the Natural History Museum in New York. It's a very well-respected institute of cultural discoveries throughout the galaxies and quadrants, and one in which your standing can affect your research a lot ability there. Words, words, words. She got kicked out. Yes.
Affirmative.
Yes. Pretty good. Way to pick that apart from context clues. Which, to be fair, it mainly gets referenced a lot. It never actually is that explained, even in canon.
It's snooty.
It's a snooty museum and research.
It's where they extract dinosaur DNA from amber specimens.
Species. All right. Well, Mike, do you know what it is? You know what it's time for? It's time to run along home to the Okay, welcome to the AlamarEmmys, where we hand out some fake awards, and there are no awards. We just talk more about the episode.
Yeah, but we're slightly bigger.
We're slightly bigger. That's right. It's when we're just slightly larger. Let us discover, are there any wormholes in the plot, Mike?
Not really. I would say that, I guess they were busy, but Q basically tells them exactly what's happening. He's like, hey, there's something happening downstairs in this auction, and whether it's the exact reason the ship's about to blow up or just something even worse is what he says, they probably should have looked into it, which would have helped them probably solve the riddle a couple minutes faster. But other than that, Keith, it seemed all right to me.
Yeah, no, I think it's hard to evaluate like holes in the plot when you have Q involved, right? Mm-hmm. Because Q can kind of do anything, and he's mysterious, so we don't always know the A to B to C's to anything. I think the technobabble part of it was always a little bit weird. I think there weren't holes in the plot, like they didn't make sense. It's just I could have used a lot more explanation about how this being was, because we had power drains for a while, then like using power was going to cause the trouble, and then we're being like dragged into the wormhole. It seemed like we had a lot of different problems that were kind of inconsistent and sort of all over the place.
Yeah, they had a perfect opportunity because there's extended sequences with Vash and Q in the very beginning of the episode where they're talking about their adventures. There's no reason they couldn't have referenced like a specific, even vaguely, encounter with this being, which maybe would have given a little context, at least planted a seed, and we would have thought the writing was a little less lazy.
Yeah, and it was. I think there was a more interesting way to tell this story, and I also think that, especially for somebody who hadn't watched the previous episodes on this, like you'd be pretty darn lost. And I understand that, especially in this show, which becomes heavily serialized. That's great. I'm totally on board with that. Like, keep up, folks. But it's not even the same show. Right. Like, you're being asked to know stuff from a completely different show, which I think is maybe a little unfair. Yeah. So I think that would be my issues with it.
Also, especially, and I'm fine with the passing context for Vash, because you get what you need to know. She was with. You don't even need to know the history with Picard, really, for her role in this episode. But they really kind of shortchange what Q is, and I feel like it's a much more interesting character with a slight bit of context. Although I guess now you know what you kind of need to know going forward.
Yeah, well, and Q is not the most consistently written character, period. I think his motivations here are pretty minor for Q. But just trying to get back with your ex, like, I don't know if that feels like Q. Anyway, so let us move forward to our best moment from the episode. Mike, what was your favorite moment? As I choke and die.
I thought, well, I really enjoyed the cheesy fight sequence because I thought that it captured the sort of tone exactly it kind of put into context, it framed the stakes of the episode. That, like, look, yes, there's a ticking clock, yes, there's all of that, but really this is sort of it's about this. It's about being silly. It's about introducing this silly character that is sort of like, at least in my viewpoint, my framing, which is just this episode right now, he's kind of a jester or a low-key that's gonna just pop in and pop out throughout the run of the series, hopefully, and look forward to those episodes, bottle episodes. And I thought that the flippancy of the scene and the kind of jokes about Picard, it all worked for what this episode was. However, so I want to give it an honorable mention. My favorite scene is actually the two scenes, the Umox scene, and then the final
Umox
scene.
negotiation.
And the final scene, because I thought, so far, every time we talk to Quark, everything, he's always sort of looked as an other. And this was sort of the first time we get to see his match, and it's a human, right? It's not even another Ferengi. So I thought it was really interesting that that we got to see another character who was very Ferengi in their the way they carried themselves, in their motivations, and yet it was just another human who was hooking up with Captain Picard, the pillar of morals. So I thought that was really cool. I really liked the pairing of them.
That's very interesting, and I think you're understanding the Ferengis pretty well already this early in the series. That she is kind of Ferengi, in her sort of lust for material wealth and lack of morals, so to speak. Yeah, I mean, what was my favorite moment? I mean, this is not my favorite episode, and I don't think it's anybody's, but I think I'm just gonna have to give it to John DeLancie's scattershot insult fest on the bridge, which I thought was just, that's what we're here for. We're here for the growl for me. Well, when Worf is there, but it, and I thought the reveal was interesting, although it was less interesting being so recycled. We recycled a prop from Next Generation. We also recycled a plot. So,
and some FX. Some FX when the ship's moving.
Well, that I understand. So, all right. So let's talk about an episode rating. Mike, how many, do you remember our currency, Mike?
Keith, get ready to be shocked and amazed when I say self-sealing stem bolts.
Yes, I am shocked and amazed. Well done. Okay. So how many self-sealing stem bolts does this episode get?
I enjoyed it for what it was. And I think that very early on, it sort of sets up what it wants to be. I actually feel like it would have been better had it done away with the need to add the ticking clock and to add those stakes. Just let it be. I mean, I guess that they need that to sort of like tie it all together and end it. Like it's a jettison point for them. But I felt like that's where it excelled was all the Q stuff. Because that's what we're doing, right? Like you said. Right. We're doing it. Let's do it. Which is why I enjoyed the sort of Pippin circus moments. That was an unnecessarily deep analogy to go to, but yeah, I agree with you. It's not the most, especially with some of the more compelling plots we've had, and we're just coming off the sort of manhunt episode. It wasn't the strongest, but I do love some scene chewing, especially when it's earned. So I did dig that. I dug Vash. She's interesting to me, if not kind of shitty. We got some great O'Brien moments. We got a weird Odo moment. It was all right. I mean, it was all right. We've yet to hit an episode I felt was bad, which I think is a good sign.
Yeah.
But it's not great, and I've got to start bell curving my rankings. So I'm gonna say 6.25 self-sealing stem bolts.
We're out of 100, so I'm going to say it's 62.
Yeah, scale it up. Scale it up.
62. Yeah. Yeah. I think the enjoyment of John DeLancie always helps it, but I think this might be the worst Q episode in Star Trek lore. And spoiler alert, he does not return on Deep Space Nine. And I think mainly he doesn't feel
interesting
right in this universe. Right. And he's fine in season 1. Later, he would feel very jarring in our universe here. I just thought it was sort of a lazy version of a Q episode, with a lot of the plot recycling, a lot of ties back to things that aren't a part of our heroes. Like, our heroes weren't really part of this episode, right? What of our characters, other than Quark, did anything? They were all just sort of there to be gags and for Vash and Q to rebound off of. So it really wasn't. It wasn't a Deep Space Nine episode, really. And I think that was, I get it. Q is great for the ratings. People get excited for Q episodes. It just wasn't a particularly good one.
Speaking of ratings, how was the show doing at this kind of juncture?
It was doing okay, but it wasn't doing fantastic yet. I think all of the Star Trek series had slow starts, both artistically and ratings wise. That is my impression. I have to go look it up. It wasn't in any danger of being canceled, but they were certainly looking for ways to, get the show up to try to match Next Gen's numbers, which it never really did, because Next Gen was just a giant hit. But it was certainly big enough, good enough to continue. They did all 7 whole seasons. So anyway, how many self-sealing stem bolts? I will always find this episode a curiosity, because it's Q on Deep Space Nine. That's just an interesting little trivia thing. A curiosity. But I'm not like, oh man, that's a good one. So I'm gonna give it 65 self-sealing stem bolts. Okay, well that is it. Next week we are doing the episode Dax, which is one that Mike, you haven't watched it yet?
I have not, no.
It's so interesting. It's one that kind of like Captive Pursuit, where I kind of forget it, and yet when I watch it, I'm like, oh wow, this is really, really good. And I'll tease you this, Mike. I think it might be a better episode of The Practice than we've seen in quite some time. So,
I'm in. A mystery, if you will.
Yes. So we have an episode of The Practice on Deep Space Nine.
Hey Keith, before you throw it to the end, I wanted to I came up with something this week that I wanted to in part thank, and this is more sincere than I generally am.
Oh, okay.
Thank your uncle for, in part, because growing up, and to this day, with COVID, the TNG, for some reason, has been like a go-to while I'm sick, watch show.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out why that is. And I always end up napping through most of the end game. And why is that? And I realized, in my adulthood, one of the things I have come to use quite often as a natural sleep remedy is white noise. And often, if I can't find the right noise, what I'll go to on the YouTube these days, I use YouTube, is like space noise. Like I'm in a space, and it's a good combination of brown noise and rumble and whatnot. And as I'm listening now to episodes with my cans, I'm recognizing that in all of these space scenes, there's an underlying layer of like a white noise sort of ambient space sound, which is like so therapeutic, sleep-wise, and just kind of anxiety reducing, that it's so subtle, but it's ever present in all of these shows. And that is in no small part thanks to the sound design. And so there you have it.
Yeah, well, it definitely is. And the ship engine rumble, right? And whether it's the ship is in motion or it's not in motion, it's ever present. And I know that, talking to when my brother started working on Voyager, his first year, while he was learning how to do it, he wasn't doing all the complex, new, interesting effects. He was doing sort of the scut work, which is adding the background noises. You start with the hum of the ship, and then you start working your way up to the beeps and boops. They're just sort of in the background going on, not when they're they're actually touching the pad, and you have to. Each cast member had a certain number of beeps they would do per move, and but getting those layers of ambient noise, which if you didn't have it, it wouldn't be Star Trek. And you hear, especially if you put headphones on when they come in and out of commercial, the first thing you hear as it fades in is the vroom of the ship, and it's a huge piece of the realism of the immersion of the episode. So yes, and you can find those hums on YouTube. You can get an 8-hour, 12-hour loop of it, and some people do sleep listening to that. So next time I talk to Jim or Sean, I will remind them of people find that useful still today, 30-something years later. All right, well, let me tell you who else we find useful, and that is our very generous patrons who help us out and help our show.
Well, so close to a pretty flawless episode.
Oh, man, we were doing so well. Thanks again to our patrons, Alan Zimmerman, Jorge Navoa, Cloud Lover 69, and Brian Kaufman. If they would like to join those folks, Mike, how would they do that?
Easy to do, patreon.com. See, now when it's here, Keith, it's too high. Patreon.com/K&M. Hey, if you can't join them, you can do us a solid. Give a like, give a subscribe, hit that notification bell. Even better, tell a friend.
Yeah.
Or blast us on social media, whatever you got to do. The more eyes, the more worth it is. We appreciate your time, and we look forward to continued journeys, cycles. I'm just saying words. Keith, find a way to pitch us to the end, please.
You can also now find us on Instagram at DS9 Reviews. Till then, this has been.
Thank you for watching K&M Entertainment. If you enjoyed our particular brand of nonsense, please like and subscribe. Or become one of our patrons at patreon.com/K&M.